listen, just one more thing.
Hello there. Welcome to my review of Season 9, Episode 2 of Colombo, Colombo Cries Wolf. First broadcast on the 20th of January 1990 on ABC, marking Colombo's fourth decade on television. Directed by the new-to-Colombo Darryl Duke and written by returning writer William Reed Woodfield, who, as well as being a TV writer, was an acclaimed photographer of Hollywood stars, including some of Marilyn Monroe's iconic images. As we'll find out, this background fits perfectly with this episode's plot. The episode begins with the return of the episode tease. I say return, but I can't be exactly sure if these are just randomly included on my DVD copies or not, or if they were always at the beginning of the broadcast episodes of the show in the original run and the relaunch. The episode itself begins with shots of an LA mansion, as the Fine Young Cannibals' She Drives Me Crazy plays over the top, perhaps foreshadowing the plot. We then see in the grounds of the Hugh Hefner-esque mansion as a series of models in swimwear are photographed for Bachelor's World magazine. And while your attention is supposed to be on the women in the foreground, there's a shot with Columbo in the background that isn't supposed to be there, taken from later in the episode. Inside the mansion, the high-waisted Sean Brantley, played by Ian Buchanan, takes nude photos of one of the models. In the office, Diane Hunter, played by Deirdre Hall, inquires about Sean's whereabouts and checks on him on the CCTV, only to discover him smooching with the model, which Diane is not happy about. Sean doesn't appear to be trying to hide this relationship, as she then watches an interview where he comes very close to saying he's engaged to the model, Tina, played by Rebecca Stabb. This only seems to enrage Diane further, however, as she tells her assistant to beep him and to call Sir Harry Matthews. At this point, there isn't a lot to go on, but it's doing well at developing a sense of intrigue. It's let down slightly by Sean's beeper, not that it's an incredibly gaudy gold bracelet, but that the beep he appears to receive seems to be a sticky label a prop guy has stuck on. Maybe this was less noticeable pre-high def, but I wish they'd just used a regular beeper, as it's laughably naff looking now. In Diane's office, she gives Sean a dressing down, and he says it's all an act for publicity, and she's the only one for him, but she's not falling for it this time, suggesting that this isn't the first.
It's just like everything else, the chateau, the live-in nymphs.
That's the same excuse you've used to justify every affair you've had with every nymph of the month for the last 10 years.
She's decided to leave him and is quitting the magazine, selling her controlling shares to the aforementioned Harry Matthews. Sean begs her to stay, and when that fails, asks her to sell him the controlling interest in the company, but she refuses, giving Sean a pretty clear motive for murder. She makes a very public exit from the mansion that evening, while Sean, in the most 90s jacket I can possibly imagine, makes a call to someone to do something quick. While Diane's driver, Costner, played by Mark Margolis, is picking up a food basket for Diane, he hears what he thinks is a gunshot, but doesn't see anything when he checks, so he continues driving Diane to the airport for her trip to London to meet Sir Harry. While we aren't entirely privy to what's going on, in the same way we have been in previous episodes, it's pretty clear that after the gunshot we aren't supposed to see Diane properly again, and neither is Costner, making it look very similar to the plot of Prescription Murder, Sean having arranged for Diane to be killed and replaced with a double who goes to London in her place, making it look like she's still alive. The next day, Columbo arrives at the mansion and is embarrassed by the photo shoot taking place.
Beautiful. Yeah. Throw your hand. Slowly. Slowly. Yes, beautiful.
Sean is incredibly surly and begrudgingly makes room for Columbo in his busy schedule. Columbo says he's acting on a call from Superintendent Dirk of Scotland Yard, his old pal from Dagger of the Mind, who is investigating the disappearance of Diane and has asked Columbo to check at his end. Sean, in another incredibly 90s outfit, particularly impressive as this was probably shot in 1989, explains Diane has always had a habit of disappearing, and this is probably no different.
But sometimes Diane feels as if she's burning out. And when she does, she takes off. She never tells anyone where she's going, she just goes.
Columbo isn't so sure, as she had a meeting scheduled with Sir Harry, and asks Sean to contact him if she calls. He also makes it clear to Sean he's not with missing persons, he's
Lieutenant Colombo, homicide.
but that there's nothing to worry about. We've seen Columbo deal with missing persons who turn out to be murders before, and his approach is similar here. Not necessarily committing to anything, just feeling out the potential suspect. He then goes to see Costner, and suggests that it might not have been Diane that he drove to the airport. Costner says it was definitely Diane he picked up, but he's less certain it was her that he dropped off. He doesn't think there was enough time to make a switch, but Columbo has his doubts. Just at that moment, a helicopter arrives on the estate to pick up Columbo to see Sir Harry. This flagrant display of wealth and power seems to really get under Sean's skin, and Columbo seems to have got over his fear of flying, suggesting that either he only uses it as a ploy with suspects, or that the fine cigar he's offered is enough of a distraction to forget about his fear of heights. Sir Harry is convinced Diane has been murdered by Sean, but Columbo is still not 100% convinced. There's a lovely little scene of them bonding over cigars, and Sir Harry potentially bribing Columbo with them.
Well, I don't need this second one, sir. I forgot. I already took two in the helicopter.
Oh, I see. Well, in that case, I insist that you take a whole lot more.
Columbo does continue to investigate and finds a shell casing in the alley where Costner stopped the car. Columbo then goes to see Diane's secretary, who mentions she overheard an argument with Sean about selling the magazine, and accidentally recorded it. Sean arrives and continues to be surly with Columbo, who proceeds in a seemingly normal way for the detective, and Sean seems to have Columbo figured out.
It's all an act with you, isn't it? You're not the naive, bumbling detective you pretend to be.
Sean owns a gun of the same caliber as the shell casing that was found, and it's been recently fired, despite Sean saying he's never fired it. Despite all appearances, it looks as if Sean might be being framed. At around the halfway point in this episode, it should be fairly clear that something different is going on here. We didn't see Diane get killed. We haven't been privy to any of the details of the murder setup. Even when Columbo takes Sean to the airport and shows him footage of Diane putting cream in her coffee when she always took it black, and he doesn't immediately notice this fact, he's not behaving quite right for a murderer. Well, there's a twist coming that, if you've seen the episode, you'll be familiar with. Diane isn't dead at all. She and Sean planned the whole scheme from the very beginning for publicity. The reason I mention this now is because this episode has the same feeling of the Season 8 episode Grand Deceptions, taking inspiration from previous episodes, with elements of Prescription Murder, Last Salute to the Commodore, and Greenhouse Jungle. The episode continues a little longer though, giving the impression that Sean is guilty and letting us know how Columbo thinks he arranged it, as well as the challenge Sean puts to Columbo to find the body, which he thinks is on the grounds. Columbo makes a grand show of looking for the body that takes him as far as the mayor, played by David Huddleston, and the chief of police, played by recurring Columbo actor John Finnegan, who has clearly had a successful career in the LAPD, working his way up from burglary detective to the chief. It certainly seems as if Columbo has bought into the fake murder plot, as we see him explain to the mayor how he reached his conclusions.
I looked at the tape at night. She's pouring cream. The very next day, I happen to hear the two people closest to her say, she never takes cream.
That's pretty good.
It's really interesting to see Columbo apparently taken in by this, and we have to assume this is genuine, as he has no reason not to believe the case as laid out before him, nor does he have any reason to investigate if he thinks he's being taken for a ride, especially with how the episode pans out. It's somewhat humbling to see Columbo try and fail to prove a murder that never happened. Unlike Blueprint for Murder, which had a similar situation, but one where we saw a murder take place and saw Columbo pretend to be taken in by the murderer in order to catch him, that's not what's happening here. We see him attempt to get the help of Sean's accomplice, as we've seen him do before, but all to no avail, as Diane finally reappears, alive and well. I do think that they may have allowed the wheels to spin on this episode for a little too long before this reveal, as it really seems to drag on repeat viewings, but it's a pretty spectacular twist on first viewing, and one that stays with you. It's really sad to see Columbo fail so publicly and so spectacularly here, as it's the first time we've seen it, and worse to see him used by these two master manipulators. But Columbo is gracious in his defeat. Of course, this is not the end of the story. Sir Harry still wants to buy the magazine, even at the now inflated price all the publicity is created, and Diane genuinely does still want to sell. So Sean genuinely does still have a motive, but just like Ken Franklin in Murder by the Book, his solo attempt at murder is far less creative, as he does a retread of the fake murder, but with Diane's second disappearance, as announced by a returning Bruce Kirby as Sergeant Kramer.
She's disappeared again.
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 Okay.
The episode title now makes sense. Columbo is immediately back on the case against the chief's orders, because Sean has made some crucial mistakes this time. Diane's beeper bracelet was not on the wrist of the Diane that supposedly left the mansion.
Don't you see something missing in that picture, sir?
What's missing?
Where's her bracelet? Like the bracelet that matches yours, sir. Where is it on that picture?
Sean failed to remove it from Diane's dead body, so all Columbo has to do is call her beeper number and find the body hidden behind the wall in her bathroom. For the most part, this is a fairly strong episode. It has a very novel plot for a Columbo that provides a lot of twists and turns, as fans of the show see elements they've seen before, but with entirely surprising angles. Sean is an entirely unsympathetic villain, twice, and in the first part of the episode, it's Columbo who's the real victim. It almost acts as a best-of, with plot points from earlier episodes, similar to Grand Deceptions from the previous season, giving a new spin to create an entirely new plot. And you feel that that was entirely intentional, with the mentions of Dirk of Scotland Yard and the appearance of John Finnegan and Bruce Kirby. I think what really lets it down, though, is the length of the first part of the story, similar to how the twist in Last Salute to the Commodore comes so late, and how quickly the second mystery is wrapped up. I think there was definitely room to make the first part of the story a bit shorter and extend the second part just a little. If Sean had hid the body anywhere other than the very room he and Columbo were in, Columbo's whole gotcha would have failed. I also think there are a few problems with how Columbo is treated in this episode. This is the first time he is completely duped by the villains, and while that could add a interesting twist, it feels like he'd be unlikely to fall for that here when he's already been through a very similar situation in Blueprint for Murder. Even so, it's a lot of fun to watch the smile drop off Sean's face when Columbo catches him. The only other big negative for me is how cheap the beeper bracelet is. It's a good idea. I mean, even Apple thought so years later. But if you can't do the effect practically, try to make it look a little better than just a sticker. For those reasons, this is a 3 out of 5 for me. Thank you. Goodbye.